After 9 decades of blissful summers here, the Queen left her beloved Balmoral for the very last time. With her are flowers from her cherished estate. The coffin draped in the royal standard for Scotland. Over the River Dee, the cortege on its way. It weaves through the landscape she loved for a lifetime. Mourners on verges, paying respects. Then a hush as the corner is turned into Ballater. Silence falls. This Highland village that thought her to be family bid a final farewell. In the town of Banchory, applause. Outside it, tractors form a guard of honour. Over the King George VI Bridge in Aberdeen, named after her father, our last king. In Mercat Cross in oldest Edinburgh, news proclaimed of our newest.
Our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III.
The first proclamation of the new monarch outside London. Scotland at the heart of proceedings, however unfamiliar.
God save the King!
The anthem, sung by political leaders. And among the crowds. Where we meet Ian, too sorrowful to join in.
Does it feel slightly conflicted to be cheering the new king as we await the Queen here?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, it does. I did not cheer, I did not sing. I'm pretty mournful, really. Yeah, it doesn't really feel like a time for jubilation.
Others are looking forward.
I brought a tear to my eye, I have to confess. I met the Queen once when I was very small. It means a lot to me to be here for that reason. But hearing everybody sing the national anthem was wonderful. And I think really important for the young children to hear that and to know that they were here. They might not really know an importance now, but they know that they were here and that something really important happened.
What other occasion would inspire this? A cordon of goodwill lined this long route, passing homes and gardens and into Dundee.
I never thought I would see it, because if she hadn't passed away in Balmoral, we wouldn't have seen any of this. So I feel very honoured to be here today.
Well, I think she is the true essence of what it means to be British, and she has worked effortlessly over the last 70 years for us, that it was only right that we pay our respects to her, and I'm glad we did.
It is the final journey of a woman woven into the fabric of this country. Across the Queensferry crossing, she opened just 5 years ago. Its sister structure, she opened more than 50 years earlier.
We remember some moments of enormous solidarity when Her Majesty came here. She came here immediately after the Dunblane tragedy in 1996 and was a visible embodiment of the grief that we were all coping with here in Scotland and of course across the United Kingdom on that tragedy. So the Queen has been with us on some really sad days. She's also been with us on some really joyful days. I remember the day she came to open the Scottish Parliament in 1999. It was a day brimming with joy, and the Queen was right at the centre of that.
Then the Queen's destination for now. The cortege greeted in the Scottish capital by streets heavy with sentiment. For mile after mile, until the Royal Mile. This cortege has passed many thousands of mourners, bidding the Queen the most gracious goodbye. From her cherished Highland retreat to the monarch's official residence in Edinburgh, the coffin brought in to the palace of Holyrood House. The journey has been long. It will lie here tonight.
Indeed, Kieran Jenkins, thanks very much. Well, I'm joined now by Baroness Davidson, the former leader of the Scottish Conservatives. Thank you very much for coming to join us here in the rain outside Holyrood House Palace. When you saw, as we all did, that coffin for the first time, that was quite a moment, wasn't it?
It was a moment, and I saw it come in the car. I've been watching it on the TV screens, all of its passage all the way down from Balmoral to Edinburgh, and then to see the soldiers take it out of the back and get in formation and take it into the Palace of Holyrood House. It was a real punch in the gut, actually. It made it real, and there has been an unreality about the last few days, but that made it real for me today.
And I was really taken aback by the crowds here in Edinburgh and also along the line of the cortege. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people.
I wasn't surprised by that, actually. I knew that there would be hundreds, thousands of people that would want to make a physical point of being able to do something for Her Majesty.
Collective grief, together.
It was, but it's also a sense of doing right by someone that's always done their duty by us. And it's a small thing to leave your house and stand for an hour in the rain now, but sun before. But it's just that sense of making sure it was done right. And I'm really proud today to show that this part of the Scottish end of it has been done right.
Talking of the Scottish end of it, she was very fond of Scotland. Balmoral was supposedly her favourite place, her favourite palace. The fact that she died past here, the fact that this is the first place a public woman lying at rest, how important is that for unionists like you?
But there's a time and a place to discuss politics, and actually I don't think now is the time, and I don't think in the lee of where her coffin's sitting tonight is the place either. I think that there will be time for us to talk about that, but whether you're on the unionist or the independent side of the argument here, there will be people of both sides that lined the streets today that came out just to show somebody who did their duty that they also wanted to do their bit. And I think that what was so appealing about the Queen's love of Scotland is that it wasn't synthetic. It was utterly honest. She loved going to Balmoral and being able to shut those gates and to be free. It was a freedom for her to be there.
No one wants to talk politics today, you're right, but these symbols are very powerful, aren't they? This is more show than tell.
Well, look, I think people will look at this, and for all that it's one of the biggest news stories in the world right now, for all there's a global impact, for all that there's a national narrative, actually a lot of people are taking this very personally. I know when I heard the news on Thursday that she'd passed, my first thoughts were actually to people that I'd lost in my own life, and I think that's for a lot of people too. So we can absolutely, and I'm always happy to discuss politics. I'm a political animal after all. But sometimes it's time to put politics aside, and today, in the rain, here in Edinburgh, is one of those times.
What do you think people here are expecting from the new monarch here in Scotland, from Charles III?
Well, we've seen over the years, him gradually take on more responsibility. First he would come with the Queen to do some of her official duties, and then sometimes he would take them on solely by himself. So I think that segue is going to be pretty seamless, actually. He's already had a good training, if you like, in all of that. But in terms of what we want to see of Charles the man, I think we've had a pretty good indication in the last 3 days, and I think people have
From his address?
Yeah, from his address, from the way in which he's conducted himself, from the way in which he's wanted to go and speak to people. He hasn't shut himself up in buildings, shut himself away with his own grief, and let's remember he's a son that's grieving his mother, and he's also doing his duty. But I mean, in terms of having a training ground, he's learned from the best, and he knows exactly what the country wants from him, because he can see how much the country has loved his mother and everything that she gave.
And despite his very long apprenticeship, the impression one gets is that he will bring a slightly different style to the monarchy, perhaps slightly warmer, perhaps slightly more open. What do you think?
Well, I think, and I mean, you'll have spoken to many people that have met him who'll say the same thing as I, is that he's actually a very funny man. He's engaging.
He's
he
made
wants
you
to
laugh?
Listen. He has, yeah, he has, and perhaps not in the way his father might have. He's got a drier sense of humour.
Right.
But and he is interested in people, and he wants to engage with them, and he's interested in issues. And many people have said that if he gets too involved in issues, that could be a problem. But I think he also, you saw in his address, he said, I understand what's expected of me.
He's going to step back from some of these issues, isn't he?
I think he may do, and be a king for all of the country.
Brian S. Davidson, thank you very much indeed. Kathy.
Thanks, Matt. Well, today has seen King Charles meet the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, as well as High Commissioners from countries which were all at one time part of the British Empire. Let's go over to Fatima Manji, who's outside Buckingham Palace. Fatima.
Well, just a few moments ago, the crowds here were pretty delighted to catch a glimpse of King Charles heading out from Buckingham Palace to Clarence House. And they were very, very pleased to be able to catch a glimpse of him. It was quite a roar, because as much as people are coming here to pay their respects to the Queen, it's also about the future and trying to see the future King Charles in action. But when we talk about the monarchy, it can never just be about the future, because the past is all around us. We're here at Canada Gate. You can see the Victoria Memorial just behind me. All the furniture, the symbols of empire are around us. When the Queen took the throne, the British Empire was just beginning to die out. What remains is the Commonwealth and 14 Commonwealth realms. Don't forget, King Charles is head of state in 14 other countries, apart from the UK. And what we are now going to see is how he deals with that relationship. King Charles arrived into Buckingham Palace to the roar of cheering crowds. All day there has been immense excitement from people here and a clamour to get close to the palace. The enthusiasm here doesn't mean that delicate diplomacy isn't needed ahead.
Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, Her Majesty.
The King held his first reception as the head of the Commonwealth at the palace this afternoon, meeting with the Commonwealth Secretary-General and High Commissioners. Some of these represent Commonwealth realms, countries where the monarch remains the head of state, where in recent years some ruptures have begun. Australia has long debated moving towards republicanism. In 1975, support for it surged when the Governor-General used the authority given to him by the Queen to sack the Labour Prime Minister, and there have long been questions about how much Buckingham Palace knew. And yet Charles has been proclaimed King of Australia too.
We promise him faith and obedience. May King Charles III have long and happy years to reign over us.
Thousands gathered in a ceremony in New South Wales to watch the proclamation, which included a 21-gun salute. The country's Prime Minister, a Republican, has said he won't hold a referendum on the monarchy in his first term.
Now's not a time to talk about our system of government. Now is a time for us to pay tribute to the life of Queen Elizabeth, a life well lived.
From the embers of empire came the Commonwealth. On her 21st birthday from Cape Town, then Princess Elizabeth made a lifelong pledge in this broadcast.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
And it was a promise she saw through, championing the Commonwealth, a central feature of her reign. When she became Queen, it was made up of 8 countries formerly colonised by Britain. They joined the Commonwealth on the basis of being free and equal members. Under Elizabeth, it expanded. Now it's composed of 56 countries representing more than 2.5 billion people, from Botswana to Bangladesh, Australia to Antigua. For Queen Elizabeth, it was important to be visible as head of the Commonwealth. She made more than 200 trips to Commonwealth countries. As nations changed and controversies erupted, she maintained a largely neutral role. Yet there were moments when protecting the Commonwealth led to unusual interventions. In the mid-1980s, she was reportedly enraged with Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher for not supporting sanctions against apartheid South Africa, something most Commonwealth states wanted. Last year, Barbados cut its ties with the Queen, becoming a republic.
The time has come to fully leave our colonial past behind.
The country remains in the Commonwealth, but the move has prompted questions about other Caribbean countries. These changing winds were clear when the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge visited Jamaica recently. In Antigua, even back in 1977, amid the welcomes, there were protests against the Queen. In April this year, Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Wessex, attempted to shore up support for the monarchy in a visit. But Antigua's Prime Minister has now said there will be a referendum on becoming a republic within 3 years. In 2018, the Queen persuaded Commonwealth leaders to support Charles as its next head. The role isn't hereditary, so it wasn't guaranteed.
It is my sincere wish that the Commonwealth will continue to offer stability and continuity for future generations, and will decide that one day the Prince of Wales should carry on the important work started by my father in 1949.
And that day has come. But what new future will King Charles now forge for a group that was originally carved from the colonial past?
With me now is Baroness Valerie Amos, International Development Secretary under Tony Blair and Britain's former High Commissioner to Australia. As a Foreign Office Minister, she was responsible for Africa and the Commonwealth. Baroness Amos, how do you see the relationship with the Commonwealth evolving during Charles III's reign?
I think it's hard to say. The Commonwealth, I think, is really important. You need to remember it's made up of very different kinds of countries, very small islands, much bigger countries that from different geographic parts of the world. The majority of those in the Commonwealth are young people. So there is a real agenda there, I think. If you think about climate change, the environment, you think about the future for young people, what is it going to look like in our world?
And that's an agenda that Charles, the new king, is keen on.
It's an agenda that King Charles is very, very keen on. And, he has played a role already through, for example, the Prince's Trust International in bringing young people across the Commonwealth together. So I think there is a role, but there is no doubt that there are countries which are both members of the Commonwealth but are also realms which have King Charles and previously had the Queen of Head of State. Some of them will be thinking about, is this a moment of transition? Is this a moment of change? Should we be doing what Barbados and others have done, which is to retain our link to the Commonwealth, but at the same time become republics?
And some of those countries have wasted no time, really, since the Queen's death in making that status plain. I mean, the leading paper in Jamaica said on Friday that the Queen's death would, and I quote, make Jamaica's break with monarchy easier. How should the new king respond to that?
I think that King Charles has been very clear. He was clear in the past. He was clear, I think, when he went to Barbados. I think people don't remember he went to Barbados when they became a republic. I think he is very clear that this is a matter for the people of those countries, that there is the issue of becoming a republic. There is a different issue, which is about remaining close to Britain, the historic and other ties which we have, continuing with those ties, and in a sense, the family of the Commonwealth continuing.
So you don't think it should be a source of embarrassment to the royal family if more and more states remove Charles, the king, as the head of state?
I absolutely do not. The world is changing. I think the fact that countries say we want our head of state not to be someone who is far away from us, but that over time we have changed, but we still recognise the historic links that we have, the close ties that we have, I think that will continue.
Is tricky though, isn't it? Because obviously the Commonwealth, as Fatima's piece made plain, goes way beyond the former British colonies. It's now 54 members, and I know 56. 56, apologies. And the Queen was proud of that growth. But it is a relic of the days of empire, isn't it?
It very much started like that. It's grown and it's expanded. And I think one of the important things about the Commonwealth is that it's a partnership, that the countries they are equal within the Commonwealth, regardless of their size, regardless of their geographical size, regardless of their population. And that kind of friendship and fellowship, which is so important in the context of the Commonwealth, I think in the modern world, in a way, is remains even more important as we see some of the political, social and other challenges. To have a place where you can have those honest conversations as leaders, equal conversations about the challenges that you face, I think is very important.
You were at the proclamation of the new king yesterday. It was a very archaic ceremony, but it was televised for the first time. How do you think, is it possible to balance sort of modern monarchy with the traditions of the past? It's an uneasy thing to do, isn't it?
Tradition and modernity is a difficult balance to strike. Our new king did that in a way as Prince of Wales. You know, he was ahead of his time in thinking about those issues around climate change and the environment. He cares passionately about education. He cares passionately about inequality, about young people. He will not be able to continue that work in the same way, but that caring that he has continues as he becomes king. So I do think it's a difficult balance to strike, but we are in a period of transition. I'm sure that there'll be ups and downs as we negotiate these new relationships, but I'm a firm believer in transparency and openness and conversation in the way that we talk about these issues.
Baroness Valerie Amos, thank you very much for joining us.